documented the once dusty roads of Harnett County, North Carolina, as a place that laid the foundation as a place of hope, a place of faith, a place of healing for our forefathers. The original residents have cultivated the land, built their homes, raised their families, and served as a catalyst in defining the culture and geographical placement of Harnett County, North Carolina. It was founded in 1855, 10 years before the Emancipation Proclamation. It was named for the Revolutionary War soldier Cornelius Harnett and was birthed out of Cumberland County, North Carolina. Many African Americans resided as a result of the slave trade on either large plantations or small farms.
While I don't feel like I used to, I done so much hard work. I'm about all in. They didn't have all these newfangled things to do, work and go about on when I was a boy. No, you just had to get it out and do all the work. Most all the work by hand. I was 10 years old when the Yankees come through. I was born February 12, 1855. I belonged to Jack Johnson. My missus' name was Nancy. My father was Butch Matthews. He belonged to old man Drew Matthews, a slave owner. My mother was named Tilla Johnson. She belonged to Jack Johnson, my master. The plantation was near Lillington on the north side of the Cape Fear River and ran down to near the Lillington Crossroads, 1 mile from the river. I had one brother and 6 sisters. My brother was named Phil, and my sisters named Mary, Caroline, Francis, and I don't remember the others, their names right now. Been so long since I saw any of them. They all dead. Yes, sir. They all dead now. Don't remember my grandpa and my grandma. No, sir, I don't. I was too small to work. They had me to do little things like feeding the chickens and minding the table sometimes, but I was too small to work. They didn't let children work much in them days till they were 13 or 14 years old. I had plenty to eat, good clothes, a nice place to sleep, and a good time. Master loved his slaves, and other white folks said he loved a nigger more than he did white folks. Our food was fixed up fine. It was fixed by a regular cook who didn't do anything but cook. He had gardens, plenty of meat, plenty, and more biscuit than a lot of white folks had. I can remember the biscuit. I never hunted any, but I went bird blinding and setting bird traps. I caught lots of birds. Jack Johnson, my master, never had no children of his own. He had a boy with him by the name of Stephen, a nephew of his from one of his brothers. Master Jack had 3 brothers, Willis, Billy, and Matthew. I don't remember any of his sisters. There was about 4,000 acres in the plantation and about 25 slaves. Master would not have an overseer. No, sir. The slaves worked very much as they pleased. He whooped a slave now and then, but not much. I have seen him whoop 'em. He had some unruly niggers. Some of them were part Indian and mean. They all loved him though. I never saw a slave sold. He kept his slaves together. He didn't want to get rid of any of them. We went to do white folks' church at Neels Creek, a missionary Baptist church. We played during the Christmas holidays, and we got about 2 weeks, 4th of July, and lay-by time, which was about the 4th. We had great times at corn shuckings, log rollings, and cotton pickings. We had dances. Master loved his slave, lots of freedom. My mother used to say he was better than other folks. Yeah, she said her master was better than other folks. The white folks didn't teach us to read and write. I cannot read and write, but the white folks, only about half or less than half, could read and write then. There were few poor white folks who could read and write. I remember the baptisms at the Reuben Matthews Mill Pond. Sometimes after a big meeting, they would baptize 24 at one time. No slaves run away from master. They didn't have any excuse to do so, because whites and colored fared alike at master's. We played bass, cat, roly-ho, and a kind of baseball called Round Town. Dr. John McNeil looked after us when we were sick. We used a lot of herbs and things. Drank sassafras tea and mullein tea. We also used sheep tea for measles. You knows that. You know how it was made. Called sheep pill tea. It sure would cure the measles. About all that would cure the measles then. They were bad then. Was then, they is now. I saw Wheeler's cavalry. They come through ahead of the Yankees. I saw colored people in the Yankee uniforms. They wore blue and had brass buttons on them. The Yankees and Wheeler's cavalry took everything they wanted. Meat, chickens, and stock. We stayed on with master after the war. I've never lived out of the state. We lived in the same place until master and Mrs. died. Then we lived with their relations right on here. I'm now on a place their heirs own. Old master loved his dram, and he gave it to all his slaves. It sold for 10 cents a quart. He made brandy by the barrels, and at holidays all drank together and had a good time. I never saw any of them drunk. People weren't mean when they were drunk then. It was so plentiful, nobody notices it much. Master would tell the children about raw head and bloody bones and other things to scare us. He would call us to the barn to get apples and run and hide, and we would have a time finding him. He gave the one who found him an apple. Sometimes he didn't give the others no apple. I married Ellen Johnson, May 22nd, 1865, the year the war went up, and my wife is living, as she sees, and able to be about. I'm not able to work, not able to go out anywhere by myself. I know I can't last much longer, but I'm thankful to the Lord for sparing me this long.
President Abraham Lincoln issued the Emancipation Proclamation on January 1st, 1863, as the nation approached its third year of the bloody Civil War. The proclamation declared that all persons held as slaves within the rebellious states are henceforth shall be free. The Emancipation Proclamation, narrated by Eric Brantley.
Now, therefore, I, Abraham Lincoln, President of the United States, by virtue of the power in me vested as Commander-in-Chief of the Army and Navy of the United States in time of actual armed rebellion against the authority and government of the United States, and as a fit and necessary war measure for suppressing said rebellion, do on this first day of January in the year of our Lord 1863, and in accordance with my purpose, so to do publicly proclaimed for the first period of 100 days from the day first above mentioned, order and designate as the states and parts of states wherein the people thereof respectively are this day in rebellion against the United States, the following, to wit: Arkansas, Texas, Louisiana, except the parishes of St. Bernard, Plaquemines, Jefferson, St. John, St. Charles, St. James Ascension, Assumption, Terrebonne, Lafourche, St. Mary, St. Martin, and Orleans, including the city of New Orleans, Mississippi, Alabama, Florida, Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, and Virginia, except the 48 counties designated as West Virginia, and also the counties of Berkeley, Accomack, Northampton, Elizabeth City, York, Princess Anne, and Norfolk, including the cities of Norfolk and Portsmouth, and which accepted parts are for the present left precisely as if this proclamation were not issued. And by virtue of the power and for the purpose aforesaid, I do order and declare that all persons held as slaves within said designated states and parts of states are and henceforward shall be free, and that the executive government of the United States, including the military and naval authorities thereof, will recognize and maintain the freedom of said persons. And I hereby enjoin upon the people so declared to be free to abstain from all violence unless in necessary self-defense, and I recommend to them that in all cases when allowed, they labor faithfully for reasonable wages. And I further declare and make known that such persons of suitable condition will be received into the armed service of the United States to garrison forts, positions, stations, and other places, and to man vessels of all sorts in said service. And upon this act, sincerely believed to be an act of justice warranted by the Constitution upon military necessity, I invoke the considerate judgment of mankind and the gracious favor of Almighty God, in witness whereof I have hereunto set my hand and caused the seal of the United States to be affixed. Done at the city of Washington, this first day of January, in the year of our Lord 1863, and of the independence of the United States of America, the 87th. By the President Abraham Lincoln, William H. Seward, Secretary.
Chatty McAllister. I was here a long time before the Yankees come here. I was about grown when they come through. I ain't all able to cook my little something to eat, and now I ain't able to work out. No, sir, not able to work. done and worked my time out. Say, I was a grown gal when the Yankees come through. I was about 18 years old. Now, I love to give you the truth, so I knows I was that old. I was a grown gal. My father was named Robert Blaylock. He belonged to the Blaylocks of Harnett County. My mother was Annie McAllister, and she belonged to Jeanette McAllister in Harnett County. I belonged to John Green at Lillington in Harnett County. See, my mother first belonged to John Green, but she got in the family way by a white man, and John Green sold her to a speculator named Bill Avery O'Reilly. Speculator. They sold my brother. He was white as you is. Oh, when the surrender came, mother went back to Miss Jeanette McAllister in Harnett County. See, that's how they got back there. Now, I wants to tell you the truth, and that's what I'm going to do. I tell you, I was whooped during slavery time. They whooped us with horse half whoops. They put a stick under our legs and tied our hands to the stick, and we couldn't do nothing but turn and twist. They'd sure work on your back end. Every time you turned, they'd hit it. Now, I've been whooped that way and scarred up. Ooh. Well, we slept on mattress made out of toe sacks. Our clothes was whole. One-piece dress made of carpet stuff part of the time. One pair of shoes a year after Christmas. They give them to us on January the 1st. Now, no shoes till after Christmas. They can give us in the holidays except Christmas in Harnett County. That was against the rules. No prayer, no nothing on the plantation in our house. They'd allow us to go to the white folks' church. They didn't allow us slaves to hunt, so we didn't have any game. And they didn't allow us any patches. Oh, no, sirree, we ain't had no money. Now, the slaves slept a lot on pallets during slavery. Pallet was a quilt or a toe carpet spread on the floor. We used a cotton pillow sometime. There's about 50 slaves on the plantation. We ain't had no overseer on Master's plantation, and no books or schools or any kind for niggas. I can't read or write. No, sir. I wish I could read and write. Well, I split rails and worked in the Cape Fear River low ground. We fenced the field with rails split from trees, from pine trees. They was 11 foot long. 11 foot long. Oh, yes, sir. I see the paddle rollers. I see plenty of them scoundrels. No, the Ku Klux. Oh, they was real scoundrels. And I just can't tell you all the mean things they done right after the war. Reuben Matthews, slave George Matthews, he killed 2 Ku Klux. They gonna double teamed him and shot him. And he cut him with the axe. And they did. I was married right after the war. The second year after the war, I married Richard Rogers, but I kept the name of McAllister right on. My husband, he'd been dead a good long time, Lord. I don't know how long. I've been married one time, and that was one time too much.
Slaves in Harnett County were housed in small huts known as slave quarters, and many of them were perhaps poor living conditions. We can only imagine the life of a slave and the emotional effect it brought on their lives. Europeans settled in Cumberland County, North Carolina along the Cape Fear River between 1730 and 1740. Some of the families were the Smith, Bowie, Shaw, and Jones families. Later other families such as the McNeil, McAllister, Williams, Smiths, and Eason families began to move to this area and create large and small plantations. Some of the known plantations were Auger-Osborough Plantation owned by the Smith families, Ellerslie owned by George Eliot, the Shaw Plantation owned by Duchy Shaw, Holly Hill Plantation owned by Kenneth Mackenzie Murchison, the William Plantation owned by Jack Williams, the McDermott Plantation owned by Daniel McDermott, Thorbescope owned by John Eliot. Hugh and Hector McLean were descendants of Archibald McLean, who owned a large number of slaves in the Barbecue area of Harnett County. Hugh and Hector later settled in the Neels Creek and Cedar Grove area. During slavery, African Americans were passed down and sold from family to family, often dividing families. Slaves from this area sold to South Carolina, Georgia, Alabama, Tennessee, and Mississippi.
The religious life of African Americans in Harnett County began with a culture of serving one God and with one faith. Mount Pisgah Harnett Original Free Will Baptist Church was one of the first African American churches formed in Harnett County in 1860. From this came other churches and denominations that spread throughout the county. McLean Chapel Free Will Baptist Church, Andrews Chapel AIM Zion Church, Norrington AIM Zion Church, St. John Baptist Church, Cedar Grove AIM Zion Church, Williams Chapel AIM Zion, Willington Grove Free Will Baptist Church, Coates Chapel Free Will Baptist Church, Dunn Chapel Free Will Baptist Church, Lillington Star Reformed Free Will Baptist Church, Bethlehem Baptist Church, Cuts Chapel Free Will Baptist Church, and White Oak Missionary Baptist Church, and numerous others have cultivated the lives of African Americans in Harnett County, North Carolina for over 150 years.
There were numerous African American families in the Harnett County area, found in the 1870 census. Here are a few. The Matthews, Spears, Masseys, Sanders, Holiday, Ochiltree, Brewington, McCoy, McLeod, and Shaw families were in the Mount Pisgah, Cedar Grove, and the Grove Township. David Campbell, Sherd McNeil, Douglas, Clarks, George Ray, Tom, and Bella McKellar, John L. McLean, were in the Norrington area, also known as the Upper Little River area. The McDougals, McLean, Walkers, Searles were in the Bunleville community. Smith and McNeil families were in the Riverside community. The Harringtons and Cameron families were in the Johnsonville area. Jack Murchison family were in the Olivia, also known as Murchison Town. The Baileys, Tuckers, Clarks, Harringtons, Pattersons, and Murchison families were in the Shawtown community. The McRae's families were in McRae Town located in Cameron. The Covington, Elliott, and McNeil families were in the Beaver Dam area. The Williams, Ferguson, Armstrong, McNeil, and Harris families were in the Bunleville, Linden,
Sarah McNeil was born into slavery in Harnett County, North Carolina on the plantation of Nancy Ann McLean Clark around the year 1800. Sarah was the oldest child born to Jenny and Joe McLean. It must be noted that some of Jenny and Joe's children go by the name of McNeil and some by the name of McLean. During the time of slavery, the slave was required to take on the owner's last name. Some slaves would keep the owner's name, while others would change it. That is why you will see the name of McLean and McNeil used for different members of the family. Sometime after her birth in 1800 and before 1812, Sarah was sold to Neil and Margaret McNeil, who had migrated from Jura, Argyll, Scotland to Cumberland County, North Carolina, the part of the county that later became Harnett County. In the year 1812, when Sarah was 12 years old, Neil McNeil died and Sarah was willed to Hector, Mary, Catherine, and Sarah, the sons and daughters of Neil. Sarah ended up living with Mary McNeil because in 1841 Mary, who had never married, left no posterity, willed Sarah to her sister Catherine, who also did not marry. In 1850, Sarah is living with Catherine McNeil. Catherine McNeil dies around 1859 and, leaving no posterity, wills Sarah to her niece Jeanette McNeil, who also never married. Sometime around 1814, Sarah met Sherrard or Sherd McNeil, and they had their first child, Elizabeth, who also went by Lizzie or Bet, around the year 1815. Sarah and Sherrard's children were divided up among Hector, Mary, Catherine, and Sarah, the 4 siblings, and some were sold off to other people. Sarah's daughter, Miss Jane McNeil, was sold to a neighbor, William Holder. In 1841, Sarah has 4 of her children living with her. They were Charles, Bet, or Elizabeth or Lizzie, Letty, and William or Will. Sarah and Sherrard or Sherd had 13 children that have been found with many hours of research and with the help of DNA. Unfortunately, no records have been found of Sherrard or Sherd. He may have been sold to another state or may have died early. Some of his descendants carry on the name of a Sherrard or Sherd. In 1865, the Civil War ends and the slaves are finally free. No trace of Sarah is found in the 1870 census, but some of her children are found. We see Sarah again in the 1880 census. Sarah is 80 years old and living with her son Charles McNeil and his family in Upper Little River, Harnett County, North Carolina. Sarah was at least 80 years old or older when she died. Sarah and Sherrard or Sherd and their children would have spent their lives working in the production of turpentine in Harnett and Cumberland County area of North Carolina. One can only imagine the suffering of being enslaved and having to endure the hardships of that life. We can be proud that our progenitors were such strong and resilient people that were able to rise above the terrible hardships they had to endure. We as their grandchildren can be grateful to have inherited this wonderful trait.
Education of African Americans in Harnett County, North Carolina played an important part of the building of the African American community. In 1920, Julius Rosenwald and Booker T. Washington felt the need to assist in the education of African Americans in the South. Julius Rosenwald established the Rosenwald Fund. This fund would help to build schools for African Americans. Harnett County has documented over 25 Rosenwald schools located throughout the county. Some of those schools are Norrington School, Bethlehem School, McLean Chapel School, Coates School, Mount Pisgah School, Murchison Chapel School, and Smith Grove School, and many others. 2 of those schools have strong alumni associations that are still operating today. Shawtown High School and Harnett High School, also known as Harnett County Training School. Graduates from these schools are still striving to create a legacy in memory of many of the graduates and educators by creating scholarships and community activities to promote higher education. There are several notable African Americans that have made a significant impact in the education of African Americans in Harnett County, North Carolina. Booker T. and Ethel Patterson Williams, Samuel Bell, James Bennett, Desi Mae McNeil McCants, Donna Arnold Thurman, Leonard Arnold, and Mr. Waddell Potter, and many others. These persons and many others have paved the way for many African Americans to be successful and make a memorable impact for many years to come.
Cemeteries in Harnett County, North Carolina play an important part of African American history. There are over 60 African American cemeteries located throughout Harnett County. Several cemeteries date back to the late 1800s, such as the Wilkins Cemetery, located in Dunn, North Carolina. There are at least 2,000 people buried there. The earliest marker found the person died in 1907. Bowdoin and Massey Cemetery are also considered some of the oldest cemeteries in Harnett County. Cameron Hill Presbyterian Church in Cameron, white congregation, have a documented slave cemetery. There are grave markers dating back to the early and mid-1800s. Other cemeteries are Wesley Chapel Cemetery, located in Lillington. Mount Pisgah Cemetery, located in Irwin. Brinkley Cemetery, located in Cameron. Walker Cemetery, located in Linden. McLean Chapel Cemetery, located in Bunlaville. Oak Grove Cemetery, located in Riverside. Love Grove Cemetery, located in Swan Station. Bethlehem Church Cemetery, located in Kipling. Just to name a few. These cemeteries and others have been surveyed and documented for historical research.